May 1945. Germany. A German general had just surrendered. His army was gone. His country was finished. He was standing in front of the man who had defeated him. Patton extended his hand. Standard military courtesy. One soldier to another. War is over. It's done. The German general looked at Patton's hand. Then he looked at Patton, and he put his hands behind his back. The room went silent. Every American officer in that room stopped breathing. A captured German general had just refused to shake Patton's hand. In front of his entire staff. In front of Patton's entire staff. Nobody moved. Patton stood there with his hand still extended. For 3 full seconds nobody said a word. Then Patton lowered his hand slowly. And what he said next made every man in that room understand exactly what kind of general they were serving. Before we get into what happened next, if you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. It was May 12, 1945. 5 days after Germany's formal surrender. Across Bavaria, German military units were laying down their weapons and reporting to American processing centers. Some surrendered quietly, relieved that it was over. Others came in with the bearing of men who had not yet accepted what had happened to their country. General Heinrich Wolff belonged to the second group. Wolff was 54 years old, from Dresden. He had served in the German military for 30 years. He had fought in the First World War as a young officer and had risen steadily through the ranks of the Wehrmacht in the Second. By the final year of the war, he commanded an army of roughly 80,000 men in southern Bavaria. He was not SS. He was Wehrmacht, the regular German army. He had followed orders. He had done his duty as he understood it. And he had, by his own account, conducted his command within the accepted standards of military conduct. He had also, by early May of 1945, watched his army reduced from 80,000 men to fewer than 20,000 through combat, desertion, and surrender. When the end came, he had gathered what remained and brought them in himself. That, in his mind, counted for something. The surrender was processed at an American facility outside Munich. Patton had decided to receive it personally. A German army commander surrendering 20,000 men was significant enough to warrant his presence. He wanted to see these men. He wanted them to see him. The room was formal. Both staffs were present. An American interpreter, Captain Werner Klein, stood to one side. Documents were prepared on the table. Wolff arrived in full uniform. Iron Cross visible. Decorations in order. He had clearly taken care with his appearance that morning. He walked in, looked at the room, and took his position across the table from the American officers. His expression was controlled. Not afraid, not broken, simply contained. The paperwork was completed without incident. Both sides signed where required. The formal process took approximately 15 minutes. When it was done, Patton stood up. He walked around the table toward Wolff. The room watched. Patton stopped in front of the German general and extended his hand. It was a gesture he had made before in similar situations. One professional soldier to another. The fighting was over. The formalities were complete. Wolff looked at Patton's extended hand. Then he looked at Patton's face. Then he put his hands behind his back, lifted his chin slightly, and looked at a point on the wall above Patton's shoulder. 3 seconds passed. Nobody in the room moved. Nobody spoke. The American officers looked at Patton. Wolff's own officers looked at the floor. Patton lowered his hand slowly. He stood in front of Wolff for a moment longer, just looking at him. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, completely level. "General Wolff," Patton said, "I extended my hand because the war between us is finished, and because you brought your men in, rather than prolonging a fight that was already decided. That deserved acknowledgment." Wolff said nothing. He was still looking at the wall above Patton's shoulder. Patton continued, "You've just told me that you don't see it that way, that you're still fighting something in your head, even though the fighting is done everywhere else." He paused. "That's your choice, but understand what it means." He took one step closer. "It means that whatever respect I was prepared to offer you as a soldier, you've declined it, not me, you, and you'll spend however long it takes you to get home having made that decision." He turned and walked back to his side of the table. "Process him through standard prisoner procedure," Patton said to his aide, Colonel Thomas Reed, without looking back at Wolff. "Same as everyone else." Reed nodded. "Yes, sir." Patton picked up his folder and walked out of the room. Behind him, Wolff was still standing in the same position. His hands were still behind his back, but something in his posture had changed. The rigidity was still there, but it looked different now. Less like discipline, more like a man standing in an empty room, wondering what he had just done. His own chief of staff, standing 3 feet away, did not look at him. Wolff was held as a prisoner of war and processed through the standard occupation system. He was released in 1947 and returned to Dresden, which by that point was in the Soviet occupation zone. He eventually moved west and settled in Frankfurt. He never gave interviews about his wartime service. He never published memoirs. Captain Werner Klein, the interpreter who had been present in that room, described what he had witnessed years later. "What struck me was how quiet it was," Klein said. "No shouting. No drama. Patton just said what was true and walked out. And somehow that was worse for Wolff than anything else could have been. Because Patton hadn't lost his temper. He'd just been completely right." Colonel Reed, who had served with Patton through France and Germany, said he had seen Patton handle difficult situations many times. But that moment stayed with him. "He could have made it into something," Reed said. "He had every right to." The man had publicly refused to shake his hand in front of both staffs. Patton could have responded any number of ways. Instead, he just told him what the refusal meant and walked out. And that was more effective than anything else would have been. Because the point wasn't to win the moment, Reed added. The point was to make sure Wolff understood what he'd lost. And he did. You could see it. Was Patton right to respond the way he did? Should he have reacted more strongly? Or was his restraint the most powerful response available? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about World War II and what real strength means, make sure to subscribe. Composure looks like under pressure. Make sure to subscribe.